Why do you keep telling yourself that you'll start when the time feels right? Even though that moment never seems to come, you feel it, don't you? That quiet tension inside you. That gap between who you are right now and who you know you could become. It sits there every single day. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it screams. You think about changing your life. You imagine becoming more focused, more disciplined, more in control. For a moment you feel ready, but then something happens. A thought appears. Not today. I need more time. I'm not fully prepared yet. And just like that, the moment slips away again. This is where most people get stuck for years. You are not waiting because you are lazy. You are not waiting because you don't care. You are waiting because your mind has convinced you that there is a perfect moment coming. A moment where everything feels clear, where fear disappears. Where confidence is natural, where you finally feel ready, but listen carefully. That moment is a lie. Your mind creates it to protect you. It wants certainty. It wants safety. It wants to avoid discomfort at all costs. So it tells you to wait, to prepare more, to think more, to delay action just a little longer, and it feels reasonable. It feels smart. It feels like you are being careful and responsible. But in reality, you are being trapped. Every day you wait, you slowly train yourself to hesitate. Every time you delay, you strengthen the habit of not acting. And habits are powerful. They shape your identity. Without realizing it, you begin to see yourself as someone who always waits. Someone who never fully commits. Someone who stays stuck in the same place while time moves forward without mercy. And deep down, that hurts, because you know you are capable of more. You know there is something bigger inside you. You feel it when you see others succeed. You feel it when you imagine a better version of your life. But instead of moving toward it, you stay where it is comfortable, where it is familiar, where nothing challenges you and nothing changes you. That comfort is costing you more than you think. It is stealing your potential. It is stealing your growth. It is stealing the life you could be living right now. And the scariest part is not failure. It is the possibility that years from now, you will look back and realize you spent most of your time waiting for a moment that never came. But here is the shift, the truth that changes everything. There is no perfect moment. There never was, there never will be. There is only this moment, right now, imperfect, uncertain, uncomfortable, and powerful, because this moment is all you need to begin. And if you stay with this message, if you truly understand what is coming next, you will not just feel motivated. You will see clearly why you have been stuck, and more importantly, how to break free from it starting today. And the reason this pattern feels so strong, so convincing, is because it is built into the way your mind works. Your brain is not designed to make you successful. It is designed to keep you safe. It constantly scans for risk, for uncertainty, for anything that could lead to discomfort or failure. So the moment you think about stepping outside your comfort zone, it reacts instantly. It sends you signals, doubt, fear, overthinking. It starts asking questions that sound intelligent, but are actually designed to stop you. What if this goes wrong? What if you embarrass yourself? What if you are not good enough yet? And you listen, not because you are weak, but because those thoughts feel real. They feel like logic. They feel like protection. But what you don't realize is that every time you obey those thoughts, you are reinforcing a pattern. You are teaching your mind that hesitation is the correct response. That avoidance is the safe path. That waiting is the right decision. And the more you repeat it, the stronger it becomes. This is how waiting turns into identity. It is no longer just something you do. It becomes who you are. You become the person who almost starts. The person who thinks deeply but acts slowly. The person who plans but never fully executes. And slowly, without noticing, your world starts shrinking. Opportunities feel heavier. Decisions feel harder. Even simple actions begin to feel overwhelming. Not because they are difficult, but because your mind has practiced not acting for so long. And this is where most people misunderstand something critical. They believe that one day they will wake up and feel confident enough to start. That confidence will come first and action will follow. But that is backwards, completely backwards. Confidence is not the cause of action. It is the result of it. You don't feel ready and then begin. You begin and then you become ready. Every person you admire, every person who seems disciplined, focused, and unstoppable did not wait for fear to disappear. They acted while fear was present. They moved while doubt was loud. They took steps when nothing felt certain. And that is why they grew, because action rewires your mind. Every time you do something uncomfortable, something uncertain, something you were afraid of, you send a powerful message to your brain. You prove that you can survive discomfort. You prove that fear is not dangerous. You prove that hesitation is optional. And slowly, something begins to shift. The voice that once stopped you becomes quieter. The fear that once controlled you becomes weaker. The resistance that once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. Not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. But this only happens through action. Waiting does the opposite. Waiting amplifies fear. Waiting feeds doubt. Waiting builds pressure until even the smallest step feels impossible. You start overthinking everything. You start questioning yourself constantly, and eventually you convince yourself that starting is harder than staying stuck. That is the trap. And the only way out is to break the pattern. Not with a perfect plan, not with a sudden burst of motivation, but with a decision. A simple, uncomfortable decision to act even when your mind is telling you not to. Because the moment you take action, even a small one, you interrupt the cycle. You take back control. You remind yourself that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who decides what to do next. And that is where your power has always been. And once you realize that your power lies in action, something else becomes impossible to ignore. You have already experienced this before. There were moments when you stopped overthinking, moments when you moved without waiting for perfect clarity. You didn't have all the answers, you didn't feel fully ready, but you acted anyway. And something shifted. Not everything, not instantly, but enough to show you what is possible. That is the part of your life your mind quietly tries to make you forget. Because those moments expose the truth. They prove that progress does not require perfection. They prove that clarity is not something you wait for, but something you create. Every step you take reveals the next one. Every action you take sharpens your direction. You don't find your path by thinking about it. You find it by walking it. Yet despite knowing this, you still hesitate, because comfort feels safe. Staying where you are requires no risk, no judgment, no uncertainty. It allows you to avoid failure, but it also forces you to avoid growth. And the longer you stay in that space, the more convincing it becomes. It starts to feel normal. It starts to feel acceptable. You tell yourself that you will move soon, that you are just waiting for the right conditions. But comfort is not neutral. It has a cost. A silent, invisible cost that grows every single day. It slowly lowers your standards. It weakens your discipline. It drains your urgency. The fire you once felt begins to fade, not because you lost your ambition, but because you stopped acting on it. And when action disappears, belief follows. You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to question whether you are really capable of becoming more. That doubt is not the truth. It is the result of inaction, because potential needs movement to stay alive. Without it, it starts to feel like a distant idea instead of a real possibility. You begin to settle. Not because you truly want less, but because you have trained yourself to accept less. And that is where the real danger lies, not in failing, not in making mistakes, but in slowly becoming comfortable with a life that is far below what you know you are capable of. There is a version of you that exists beyond this pattern. A version that does not wait. A version that does not need perfect conditions. A version that moves with clarity even in uncertainty. That version is not a fantasy. It is not reserved for other people. It is built through the choices you make starting now. But it demands something from you. It demands that you stop negotiating with your excuses. That you stop listening to the voice that tells you to delay. That you stop choosing comfort over growth. Because growth is not found in waiting, it is found in movement, in friction, in discomfort. In showing up when you do not feel like it, in taking steps when your mind is filled with doubt. That is where strength is built. That is where identity changes. And the moment you understand this deeply, waiting begins to feel unbearable. Because you see it for what it really is, not preparation, not strategy, but avoidance. And once you see that clearly, you can no longer pretend that waiting is helping you. You realize it is the very thing holding you back. And when you finally see waiting for what it truly is, something inside you begins to shift in a way that cannot be reversed. You start to notice how every delay has been feeding something you never intended to grow. Fear, doubt, hesitation. Not because they are stronger than you, but because you have been giving them time, attention, and control. The longer you avoid action, the larger these feelings become. They expand in your mind until even the smallest step feels overwhelming. But here is the truth most people never fully understand. Fear does not grow because things are actually dangerous. It grows because you keep stepping away from them. Every time you avoid, your mind learns a dangerous lesson. It learns that the thing you avoided must be important enough to fear. It marks it as a threat, and the next time you face it, the resistance is even stronger, the doubt is louder, the hesitation is heavier. This is how a simple decision turns into a mental barrier. Not overnight, but slowly, quietly, repeatedly. And this is why waiting is never neutral. It is not just a pause, it is reinforcement, it is training your mind to stay stuck. But the moment you act, even in the smallest way, you break that pattern. You send a completely different signal. You show your mind that the thing you feared is not as powerful as it seemed. You prove that discomfort is temporary, that uncertainty is survivable, that action is possible even when nothing feels perfect, and something powerful happens in that moment. The fear does not disappear instantly, but it loses its authority. It stops controlling you. It becomes something you can move through, not something that stops you completely. And that shift changes everything, because now you are no longer waiting for fear to leave. You are moving despite it. That is where real transformation begins. Not when everything feels easy, but when you decide that your goals matter more than your comfort. When you choose to act even while your mind is still resisting. When you stop asking for permission from your emotions and start giving commands through your actions. This is the difference between people who stay stuck and people who grow. One group waits to feel ready. The other decides to act and becomes ready along the way. And once you step into that second mindset, even in the smallest way, your identity begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hesitates. You stop labeling yourself as someone who overthinks. Instead, you start to build a new image. Someone who moves, someone who executes. Someone who does not let temporary feelings decide permanent outcomes. And identity is everything. Because once you believe you are someone who acts, action becomes natural. It becomes automatic. You no longer fight yourself the same way. You no longer waste energy trying to convince yourself to start. You simply begin. But it all starts with a single moment. A moment where you interrupt the pattern. A moment where you feel the resistance, hear the excuses, sense the fear, and still choose to move forward. That moment is available to you right now. Not when you feel different, not when life becomes easier, not when everything aligns perfectly. Right now, exactly as you are, because the longer you wait, the stronger the pattern becomes. But the moment you act, no matter how small the step, you begin to take your power back. And when you begin to take your power back, even in the smallest ways, you start to notice something that most people never fully understand. You were never actually stuck. You were just paused in a pattern of waiting, a pattern of thinking instead of doing, a pattern of choosing comfort in the present over growth in the future. And patterns feel permanent only because they are repeated, not because they are unbreakable. The moment you interrupt that pattern, even once, you create a crack in it. And through that crack, something new begins to form. But your mind will not let go easily. It will try again. It will bring back the same thoughts, the same excuses. The same quiet voice telling you to slow down, to wait, to be careful. And this is where most people fall back. Not because they cannot change, but because they expect the resistance to disappear after one step. It doesn't. Resistance is part of the process. Growth feels uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. Your brain prefers what it knows, even if what it knows is holding you back. So when you step forward, it pulls you back, not out of weakness, but out of habit. And this is where discipline is born. Not in moments of motivation, but in moments of resistance. Discipline is not about feeling strong. It is about acting when you do not feel strong. It is about showing up when your mind is full of reasons not to. It is about choosing action over emotion, again and again, until that choice becomes natural. And here is what most people miss. You do not need a massive, life-changing move to transform your life. You need consistent, imperfect action. Small steps, repeated daily with intention, because every small action sends a signal. Every small action reinforces a new identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who waits, but as someone who moves, not as someone who doubts, but as someone who tries. Not as someone who avoids discomfort, but as someone who faces it. And that shift is everything. Because once your identity begins to change, your behavior follows naturally. You stop forcing yourself to act. You become the type of person who acts. And that is where real momentum begins. Momentum is not created by big moments. It is created by consistency. One step leads to another. One action builds confidence for the next. One decision strengthens your belief in yourself. And slowly, without even realizing it, the things that once felt difficult begin to feel normal. What once required effort now feels automatic. And the life you once thought was out of reach starts becoming your reality. But it all depends on one thing: whether you continue the pattern of waiting or you commit to the pattern of action. Because both patterns grow stronger with time. If you wait, hesitation becomes your identity. If you act, progress becomes your identity. There is no neutral ground. Every day, every decision, every moment, you are reinforcing one or the other. And the truth is, you already know what you need to do. You don't need more information. You don't need more time. You don't need the perfect plan. You need to trust yourself enough to begin, not perfectly, not confidently, but honestly. Because the version of you that you want to become is not waiting for the perfect moment. It is waiting for you to stop waiting. And the moment you stop waiting, something unexpected begins to happen. You start to see time differently. Before, time felt like something you had plenty of, something you could spend later, something you could rely on to give you another chance. But now you begin to feel its weight. You begin to understand that every day you delay is not just a delay, it is a decision to stay the same. A decision to remain where you are, even when you know you are meant for more. And that realization hits deeply, because it forces you to confront something uncomfortable. Not what you could become, but what you might never become if you keep choosing to wait. 1 year from now, your life will not magically change. You will either be in the same place, repeating the same patterns, thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same frustration, or you will be somewhere completely different, shaped by the actions you chose to take starting today. There is no third option. Time does not reward intention, it rewards action. You can plan all you want. You can think, analyze, prepare, and imagine. But none of that creates change unless it is followed by movement. And the longer you stay in your head, the more disconnected you become from your potential. Because potential without action is just an idea, and ideas do not transform your life. Execution does. This is why waiting is so dangerous. It feels harmless in the moment. It feels like you are just pausing, just thinking, just preparing. But in reality, you are slowly building a life that looks nothing like the one you truly want. Not because you lack ability. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you keep postponing the very actions that would change everything. And deep down, you already feel this, that quiet frustration. That sense of being stuck, that awareness that you are capable of more but not living it. That feeling does not come from nowhere. It comes from the gap between your potential and your actions. And that gap only grows when you wait, but it shrinks the moment you move. Even the smallest step begins to close that distance. It reconnects you with your own power. It reminds you that change is not something distant or complicated. It is something you create moment by moment, decision by decision. And this is where urgency becomes your greatest advantage. Not panic, not pressure, but a clear understanding that your time matters, that your life is happening right now, not someday in the future. That every moment you hesitate is a moment you cannot get back. When you truly understand this, waiting no longer feels safe. It feels expensive, because you start to see the real cost. The lost opportunities, the delayed growth, the version of yourself that remains unrealized. And once you see that clearly, something inside you refuses to go back. You no longer want to wait for the perfect conditions. You no longer want to rely on motivation or mood. You begin to value action itself. You begin to respect movement, no matter how small. Because you understand that consistency beats perfection every time, and that is where everything changes. You stop chasing the perfect moment and you start creating meaningful ones. Moments where you act despite doubt. Moments where you choose growth over comfort. Moments where you prove to yourself that you are no longer controlled by hesitation. And those moments begin to define you. Not your fears, not your excuses, not your past, but your actions. And when your actions begin to define you, something deeper starts to solidify within you. You begin to trust yourself, Not in a loud, emotional way, not in a sudden burst of confidence, but in a quiet, steady certainty. The kind that grows each time you do what you said you would do. The kind that forms when your behavior aligns with your intention. Because for so long, the real damage was never the waiting itself. It was the broken promises you made to yourself while waiting. I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it later. This time will be different. And when tomorrow came, nothing changed. Each time that happened, a small piece of trust faded, not trust in the world. Not trust in others, trust in yourself. And without that trust, everything feels harder, decisions feel heavier, action feels uncertain. You hesitate not because you cannot move, but because you are no longer sure you will follow through. But now, that begins to change. Because every time you act, especially when you don't feel like it, you repair that trust. You prove to yourself that your words have weight, that your decisions mean something. That when you say you will move, you actually move. And that changes your identity at the core. You are no longer someone who relies on mood. You are no longer someone who waits for motivation. You become someone who operates on decision. Someone who understands that feelings come and go, but actions create results. This is where real control begins, not control over circumstances. Not control over outcomes, but control over yourself. And once you have that, everything else becomes possible, because the external world stops being the main obstacle. You stop blaming time, conditions, or other people. You stop searching for the perfect setup. Instead, you focus on the one thing that has always been in your control, your next move. And that simplicity is powerful. It removes the noise. It removes the confusion. It removes the endless cycle of overthinking. You no longer need to figure out everything at once. You only need to decide what you will do next and then do it, again and again. And with every repetition, something inside you becomes stronger. Your discipline sharpens, your focus deepens. Your resilience grows, not because life becomes easier, but because you become more consistent in how you respond to it. And consistency is what separates intention from transformation. Anyone can feel inspired for a moment. Anyone can decide to change for a day. But very few people commit to showing up every single day, especially when it is uncomfortable, repetitive, and slow. That is where the real shift happens. Because when you continue to act without waiting for perfect conditions, you break free from the cycle completely. You are no longer controlled by fear because you have learned to move with it. You are no longer controlled by doubt because you have learned to act despite it. And most importantly, you are no longer controlled by time. You stop saying someday. You stop believing in the right moment. You understand that the only moment that has ever mattered is the one you choose to act in, right now, this breath, this second. This decision. And when you truly accept that, when you stop looking for permission and start creating momentum, your life begins to move in a completely different direction. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but undeniably. Because you are no longer waiting, you are becoming.